You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And what a week it has been. I am resolved to try to keep this program steady and whole and looking at the entire planet, since it's very tempting to focus only and ever on what's happening in Washington, D.C., but we know that Washington, D.C. is not, in fact, the center of the cosmos, and we're very grateful for that. Nonetheless, we'll touch on that, much as it's changing second to second. I think we're developing the capacity to breathe underwater or at very high altitudes. If we're not, we better, because we're going to go straight through impeachment into election, and we better develop some kind of superhuman capacities to get through the rest of 2019 and into 2020. Deep breathing, indeed. We've got a wonderful guest for the conversation, someone who has her finger on the pulse of Generation Z, which is a hope for the future. And we have an unusual fighting words, an unusual surrealism corner, and, well, inside the headlines is just as unusual as it always is, I guess. That's a new normal. So we better get started and go there, inside the headlines. No, this is not about Donald Trump, who only flails and fulminates the more as he finds himself cornered in the corner that he himself has trapped himself in. This is about the rest of the world. For example, the Speaker of Nepal's lower house of parliament resigned from his position on Tuesday last after a parliamentary employee accused him of raping her on Sunday in her apartment in Kathmandu, the capital. Krishna Bahadur Mahara, the lawmaker who is a major figure in the country's governing Nepal Communist Party, denied assaulting the woman and said that she was retaliating after being denied a job in his office. But at an emergency meeting, party leaders, including Prime Minister K.P. Sharma Oli, ordered Mahara to step down, and he did so shortly thereafter. He will retain his seat in Parliament, however. Such swift action is rare in Nepal, where the Me Too movement against sexual harassment has struggled hard to gain ground. Some Nepali victims of sexual harassment and abuse have spoken out against the abuse and against alleged perpetrators in the past year, but the accused, although they included politicians, academics, and theater artists, none have been charged. So this is the first time that the Me Too movement has gained actual ground. According to local news accounts, the woman said that Mahara had tried unsuccessfully for years to force himself upon her. She said that on Sunday evening, when her husband was away, Mahara came to her apartment with whiskey and snacks, and his security guards were stashed outside while he forced her to drink liquor and then raped her and beat her when she tried to resist. He is a former Maoist rebel leader who served as a government minister multiple times, and he's been an important leader in Nepalese politics. In the same realm, for those of us who have felt saddened at the loss of Al Franken in the Senate, but nonetheless discomforted by the accusations against him, which were never quite proven but never disproven either, and the photograph was really lethal. Well, now a woman has come forward with new accusations that former U.S. Senator Al Franken groped her behind during an event in 2006 after he worked the photo line. 8 other women have accused Franken of inappropriate behavior, including 3 others who also say he grabbed their buttocks. He resigned, of course, in 2017, but he too is making a comeback. He'll soon host a weekly show, a new show on Sirius XM. So if you have felt uncomfortable that he left the Senate and was forced out before, feel less uncomfortable now. His politics, except on women, were good. But women are half the human species, including us. As the U.S. population continues to age rapidly, older Asian Americans are struggling to find appropriate long-term care in their homes, many because of lower financial resources. Remember, too, that this is a community where culturally it's deeply embedded that there should be reverence for the elderly, and they should be cared for with respect and love. Well, research from the National Asian Pacific Center on Aging found that 42% of Asian Pacific Islanders provide care to older adults compared to 22% of the general population, and that almost 12% of Asian Americans ages 65 and older were either at or below the poverty level. Now look back at that 42% of Asian Pacific Islanders who provide care to older adults compared to 22% of the general population, and you know and I know that that 42% is, I would say, 41.75% female, providing that care. Melinda Gates, Bill Gates' wife, I don't usually identify people that way, but for those who might not know, has announced that over the next 10 years she will be committing $1 billion to promote gender equality. Now, back in 1997, Ted Turner, you may remember, made a similar big bet, giving $1 billion to create the United Nations Foundation. At the time, he also advocated banning men from public office. He was married to Jane Fonda at the time, and that explains a lot. Quote, "Men should be barred from public office for 100 years in every part of the world," he said. "The men have had millions of years where we've been running things, and we've screwed it up hopelessly. Let's give it all to the women," close quote. Well, Melinda Gates was quoted in Time magazine saying that her decision was based on a mixture of outrage, optimism, and impatience. She's outraged that in 2018, quote, "there were more men named James running Fortune 500 companies than there were women. This year, only one CEO on that list of 500 is a woman of color. Women are 51% of the population, but hold only 24% of the seats in Congress." Close quote. Welcome to the ranks, Melinda. Maybe start in with revamping the Big Brother ethos in Silicon Valley. Big Brother in so many ways of big tech. It wasn't even October before winter fully arrived in Browning, Montana, with 48 inches of snow falling this past weekend, according to the National Weather Service. Strong winds and heavy snowfall created snowdrifts as high as houses, as well as downing trees and power lines. The governor's office said unseasonably cold temperatures could delay the thawing of the crystals, resulting in the end of the growing season for some of the state's agricultural producers. And of course, Montana is a largely agricultural and cattle state. And counter this. Concerns over high temperatures during next year's Summer Olympics in Tokyo have led to government officials restricting volunteer shifts to 1-hour intervals. Temperatures in the Japanese capital city regularly exceed 30 degrees Celsius, that's 86 degrees Fahrenheit, in the summer months of July and August. Other cooling measures for spectators and volunteers include rest spaces, neck coolers, paper fans, and the distribution of crushed ice and umbrella hats. Well, that's all very well, but you can't use an umbrella hat against climate change, and you can't use an umbrella hat against 48 inches of sudden blizzard snow in early October in Montana. That's climate change. Meanwhile, back home, Trump is calling for civil war, which is so helpful. But here's the thing. We seem to have reached the tipping point, finally. A majority of all registered voters are now for impeachment. Well, well, well. And guess what? Nature knows. Dolphins are swimming, mating, and even giving birth in the Potomac again. It's time for our first pause, but there's a big show ahead of us. We've got a surrealism corner that's worthy of the Twilight Zone, and a conversation about Gen Z that will gladden your heart, not to speak of fighting words. All of that yet to come on Women's Media Center Live, so stay tuned. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And so we find ourselves in the surrealism corner. It's long been assumed that dogs are sociable and faithful and friendly, while cats are mysterious and aloof. But research into cats' behavior has lagged way behind that of dogs. Well, now Dr. Kristen Vitale, an animal behavior scientist at Oregon State University, seems to have proven otherwise. In a 2017 study, Dr. Vitale and her colleagues found that a majority of cats preferred interacting with a person over playing with a toy or even eating. And eating is a serious business. In a 2019 study, the researchers found that cats adjusted their behavior according to how much attention a person gave them. Well, who wouldn't? Other researchers have found that cats are sensitive to human emotion and mood. I can testify to that. And that cats know their names. I can testify to that. Still others indicate that once a cat forms a bond, it remains stable over time. Oh, I can testify to that. Dr. Vitale and her colleagues plan to delve more deeply into cats' relationships with people. I could testify to that. I think you can tell that I was once a cat lady who had as many as 5, count them, 5 cats. Meow. Here's a lovely, if slightly surreal, item. As long as 7,000 years ago, Stone Age farmers in Central Europe were making and using small pottery bottles or cups that had spouts. Scientists had wondered whether these could possibly have been baby bottles. It seemed that way, although they could have been used to nurse the sick. Well, as the Stone Age gave way to the Bronze and Iron Ages, the vessels were more widely used, and some were formed in the shapes of animals. Archaeologists have found the small containers in the graves of children and infants, suggesting that they were used in weaning children from breastfeeding. They're charming little animal shapes. Goats, seeming cows, maybe buffaloes. Until now, though, researchers hadn't analyzed residues in the containers. Recently, though, archaeologists reported in the journal Nature that 3 such objects, all found in the graves of children in Bavaria, dating from about 2,500 to 3,200 years ago, once held dairy products, most likely milk from ruminants like cows or goats. Proving exactly how any ancient bit of pottery was used is difficult, but Julie Dunn, a geochemist at the University of Bristol in England and one of the authors of the report, said that the location of the feeding cups in child graves, along with the new chemical evidence, is as close as you're going to get to that proof. I love the idea of women potters, because they were women who did the pottery, creating weaning cups for their babies, and then, sadly, if the child died, burying them with the infant. And this last item is much more modern, unfortunately, and much more serious. The New York Times recently published an item that I think is deserving of wider attention if you haven't heard it. If you're a runner, I'm not, but I have dear friends who run all the time, and I know the dangers that they faced. Gender-based harassment affects 65% of women runners and only 25% of men, according to the National Street Harassment Report. And it ranges from ugly words to physical attacks that's thrown at female runners. So the New York Times recently published this extremely helpful short list of tips for safety while running. Run in a populated area or with a running buddy. You can also reach out to your local running club to see if they have weekly group runs. Make sure you can hear what's going on around you. If you have to listen to music, keep the volume low enough to hear yourself talk over it. Test yourself. Put on your tunes and recite the alphabet. If you cannot hear your own voice, turn the music down. Wear running lights and/or reflective clothing when running at night. Change up your route. People targeting runners are often looking for someone who's in the same place at the same time all the time. Have identification with you. It should contain your name and the contact information of a local friend or relative who can be called in case of an emergency. You can buy an ID tag that connects to your shoelaces or around your wrist or ankle. You can carry a laminated piece of paper with your name on it, or write it on your shoe, or a tag on a handheld water bottle, whatever. If something does happen, you have a few options when it comes to responding to harassment, says Holly Carroll, founder and executive director of Stop Street Harassment. You can ignore it. You can run away and/or call for help if you feel you're in danger. You can keep going and show you disapprove of what happened by glaring back at your harasser or shaking your head, I guess if you feel it's minor. Only if you feel it's minor. You can confront the harasser. Some women feel comfortable doing this. If you do feel comfortable, then Ms. Carroll recommends saying something short or assertive like, "No, stop it," or "That's harassment." Only if you feel safe doing this, and you can report it. What type of harassment is considered a crime depends on your state. Stop Street Harassment has an online guide that you can consult. For more tips on running while female, check out How to Run Like a Girl at nytimes.com/guides. It's a pity that you need to do so, and it's surreal and ridiculous that you have to do so. But it's better safe than sorry, and better safe than surreal. We've got to take another quick break, but stay tuned, especially if you thought that principled political teens like Greta Thunberg were somehow an anomaly, and that most teens were busy taking selfies and vaping. You've got another thing coming right up in the conversation. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
My guest for the conversation is Samhita Mukhopadhyay, who is the editor of Teen Vogue. She's also the author of Outdated, Why Dating is Ruining Your Love Life, and she's the co-editor of the anthology Nasty Women, Feminism, Resistance, and Revolution in Trump's America. Samhita started blogging in 2005 and contributed an essay on the sexualization of black women to Jacqueline Friedman and Jessica Valenti's anthology Yes Means Yes, Visions of Female Sexual Empowerment. She earned a master's degree in Women and Gender Studies in 2009 from San Francisco State University, where her thesis was entitled The Politics of the Feminist Blogosphere. She's the former executive editor of the blog feministing.com, and she's a graduate of the Women's Media Center's Progressive Women's Voices program. And later this month, in October, she will be honored as the Progressive Women's Voices Impact Award winner at the WMC Annual Awards Gala. And here she is in all her glory, Samhita Mukhopadhyay. Samhita, welcome to the program.
So good to be here, Robin.
Well, you are presiding over a generation that is absolutely what we've been dreaming of, we older ones, for some time. There's the Parkland, Florida activists, the anti-gun, pro-gun reform activists. It's Greta Thunberg and the climate change school strikers. It's on so many fronts that teenage women as leaders and guys, but the women are really the leaders, and younger people even, middle schoolers are in the streets and striking and acting in so many ways. And you, as the editor of Teen Vogue, have emphasized the teen more than the Vogue, and you've politicized the magazine in wonderful ways. Talk about how you came to Teen Vogue. I know that you were a famous or infamous, depending on the perspective, famous to me, blogger, and you were with feministing.com, and you were quite a presence online before coming to Teen Vogue, weren't you?
Robin, you're so flattering. I'm glad somebody was reading Feministing.
No, I'm understating. If anything, I'm understating.
I mean, as you say, we had started, Feministing was founded by Jessica and Vanessa Valenti in 2004, and at the time, I mean, it's crazy to think that that's over 15 years ago now. At the time, everyone said, well, feminism is dead, right? Nobody, these young people, they're worried about their songs and boys, and they're not worried about feminists. And we said, at the time, we were in our early 20s, and we said, that's not true. We know a lot of young women are kind of engaging with these issues. And so, that really, I think, started for my career in, I had kind of historically been an activist doing much more community organizing. And when we started writing, it almost became an online consciousness raising group, right?
Exactly.
You had all of these, you had, all out of nowhere, the news is saying feminism is dead, yet our numbers told a different story, right? We knew there was this kind of generation that was really active and really engaged.
Well, we older feminists were certainly not saying it's dead because we knew that the press had been saying it's dead with tedious regularity, on the dot about every 5 years since the 1960s. Oh, it's dead now. Isn't it dead yet?
Yep.
Oh, maybe now it's dead. Surely it's dead now. And each time we kept coming back, and here you were, and very welcome. So we welcomed you. We knew you weren't dead. And I remember telling Jessica Valenti, thank God you're here.
Yes. No, and I mean, your generation, and I think it's important to highlight this work because people try to say that there's tension between generations, but actually my experience has been that older feminists have done nothing but kind of open their arms and be so excited to see us here and elevate our voices as well. And, I think the Women's Media Center is kind of at the epicenter of that kind of work of really identifying and elevating young voices. And so I mean that, my being trained by the Women's Media Center and I think, doing the online stuff positioned me in a good way because lo and behold, a couple of years ago, publications looked around and said, oh, wait, we don't have enough women on our staff. We don't have people that are educated on issues of feminism and social justice. And yet we have a generation that's demanding this content. And so you had this kind of generation of people, myself, a lot of the editors from Jezebel, many of the feministing editors, many of us have kind of gone on to careers in more quote unquote mainstream media because a lot of the leadership in those organizations have recognized, well, we actually need people that can speak to this generation of young women that are demanding better. They want better representation. They don't want to see airbrushing. They don't want to see just the same kind of skinny white models. They want to see the full range of experiences that they kind of have in their own lives. And and that now includes the activism. And that's really how. So, a couple of years ago, Philip Picardi, who was the chief content officer, hired me and brought me in partially because he had seen my work over the last couple of years and knew he needed an expert in kind of social justice and in movement building for us to be able to really build out that form of reporting at Teen Vogue. And so, it was it was one of those, really synergistic moments that the universe opened up and said, we want a feminist and we want someone who kind of has this particular type of experience. And it's been a tremendous experience. I mean, they've been unbelievably supportive, I think, broadly at Condé Nast. They're very supportive of the publication. And I think there's a recognition across the industry that this generation wants more. They demand more. They want representation that kind of reflects their values. And it behooves us to really pivot and create content that speaks to them.
Yes, well, it's a far cry from the days when we had to sit in at Condé Nast in protest of the content of their magazines.
Yes.
So it's a process. I mean, it really is very interesting to be able to watch that process evolve over time. Talk about the kind of things you've been able to do at Teen Vogue. I know that you've addressed body image and size of women so that they're not all bulimic, as well as white women so thin that if they stand sideways, you can see right through them. And diversity is not even a question in your Teen Vogue because it's inherent in everything that the staff is and everything you do. Talk about how that all evolved.
Yeah, I think similarly, it happened fairly organically. There was, a very young and engaged staff here. And the leadership at Teen Vogue has kind of always reflected our readership, right? Prior to our current editor-in-chief, Lindsay Peoples-Wagner, who is a Black woman who's kind of really made her name in inclusion in the fashion industry and kind of, wrote a very groundbreaking piece for where she used to be at The Cut about Black women in fashion and just being Black and working in the fashion industry. And then prior to that, we had Elaine Welteroth, who is also an outspoken advocate for diversity. And Philip Picardi, who, is now the editor-in-chief of Out magazine and has really used his mantle to kind of elevate the disenfranchised voices and has changed the face of that magazine as well. And so, it was part of the leadership. And I think that the team was really, again, reflective of this diverse America, with this diverse readership that we recognized. And they wanted content that reflected their values, and it became part of our broader mission. I mean, it's not even something that we don't even have to say that, like, oh, we also consider inclusion. It's like, no, that's the given.
That's right.
Now how are we going to do and now how are we going to do quality stories and quality content on top of that?
Yeah, it's the entree. It's not the side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also being, very cautious that we also want rigorous reporting. We want really well fact-checked stories. We want features. We are not doing diversity as this symbolic moment, but it's actually pivoting and creating a publication that is rigorous and it is meaningful and it adds value, and it's also rooted in this kind of idea of inclusion and diversity.
Facts in the age of Trump. What a refreshing concept. Samhita, my God. Yeah.
I mean, some people are afraid to have a point of view. Let's just say we're not.
And your readership, what is the approximate age range of your readership? Because as I remember, usually it's younger than the age it supposedly is. In other words, women who were around age 17 were actually reading, in the old days, Mademoiselle, whereas women who were 13 and 14 were actually reading the magazine 17. Is that still true?
That is true for us. I will say the core of our readership is 16 to 24. So while we do have a lot of younger fans, they tend to not be the ones that are reading the publication as regularly as later teens, so like 16, 17, 18. And then young college students are very, very engaged in, and I think as we've also diversified our content, we have attracted a bit of an older audience. So there are, I hear a lot of people my age, maybe not as old as me, but like in their 30s and their late 20s that say, hey, look, I get my news from Teen Vogue because I know I can trust it and I, appreciate the point of view and I see myself in this coverage, and I go to other publications and I don't see myself in the coverage. And so we, I would say our two big groups are 16 to 24 and then 24 to 32. And that's exciting to us because then what we're saying, there's two things that I think are happening. There's both the fact that teens have a lot to teach us right now. They have a lot to teach us about persistence and about getting attention and about creating a movement. And to me, it's exciting because we have the opportunity to kind of spotlight those teens, and we're not just doing it for other teens, but we're doing it for the rest of the world. We're doing it for older people that are like, wow, these teens are great. And it's like, you know what? Like, that's right. This Greta's message is not just for other teens. It's galvanizing the largest movement that we've ever seen of teens organizing for an issue.
That's right.
But it's not just for teens. Her message is for all of us. Her message resonates for us. It resonates for all generations.
And there's something so pure about it. I mean, and so by pure, I mean the outrage is clear. It's not fancied up by diplomatic language. It hasn't been worn down yet, or maybe hopefully ever, by years of having to rephrase so it's, quote, tolerable and acceptable and doesn't turn people off. So when she says, how dare you rob me of my future while you talk about whether fighting climate change is cost effective. How dare you? Her outrage is palpable. And the same with the Parkland activists, and the same, and it's quite true. Their passion is felt and communicated, and it's so wonderful. Mention some of the stories that you've published recently that you're especially proud of.
So there's many. We did have Greta on the cover a couple of weeks ago for the special issue in conjunction with the Youth Climate March, and that was exciting. And I think to your point about these kind of unapologetic teens that are modeling what rage looks like. We have to remember this is also the generation that's been dismissed because everyone thinks they're just taking selfies on their phones and on social media, right? And they don't care about what's going on in the world around them. And I think this is such, for lack of a better word, an FU to that idea. I mean, Greta doesn't care. Greta doesn't care what she looks like. She doesn't care what clothes she's wearing. She is invested in the message that she is distributing. And I think that is a very nice, kind of counter to a lot of the misconceptions about Gen Z. Yeah. So we're very excited about Greta. I think that's, I can't pick favorites, but I was very excited about having that as a cover. We also, prior to that, we shot, as you say, we did a whole package on body diversity, which, was a series of essays, including an essay that I actually wrote about my own experience with accepting the word fat and, working in fashion and kind of being a public person and always having people criticize you and your body. And we got a really good response from that. And I think, one of the biggest responses we got from it was that, this is happening under the title of Teen Vogue, right? And how important that is. And, we shot a size 24 model for the cover, the kind of special issue of that and she's a model, but she's not someone who gets booked a lot. And so we really wanted to make a statement about the kinds of people that we want to elevate and the kinds of people we want to photograph.
That is
so
revolutionary. I mean, it's just so revolutionary because we have never been able in what is almost 50 years, basically, of this contemporary wave of feminism in the States and internationally, to crack that wall of of body image that descends on girls when they're just entering puberty, of what supposedly is the male gaze or the attractive look. I mean, and it is so deleterious to health and image and everything else. So that is huge that you did that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. And a lot of support internally to make that happen. And I think that it was also another place where there's an opportunity for us to really model, look, we know that toxic images of women and unattainable beauty standards has had a profound impact on young women and girls, right? We know that it's impacted their self-esteem. We know that it's impacted their food. And so frankly, as a journalistic institution, it's our responsibility to report out and show that, no, these body standards are changing and you should accept yourself for how you are. And there's opportunities for, let's focus on health and wellness. I mean, this generation is so invested in self-care. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that, because they see, even my generation, they're like, oh my God, like Gen X, it's like, you guys, you don't know what self-care is. Like, you worked yourself into the ground. And like, we're not going to do that. We're going to think about sustainable jobs, and we're going to think about taking care of ourselves, and we're going to think about how to save the climate and save the earth, and all of these kind of questions that I think we were kind of along for the ride and trying to figure it out as we went. And so that's very grounding, and I think gives us a big opportunity. I mean, we do a lot of work around self-care. I'll say the other kind of line of articles that I've been really excited about this last year is we have a sex and dating column where we take on, and this is what we get. We're under a lot of scrutiny for this. I mean, Tucker Carlson is obsessed with us. He's obsessed with our sex column, and he's obsessed with our labor column. And I'm obsessed with him being obsessed with us.
Now you've really made it. You've really made it if you're in the crosshairs of Fox. You have.
Exactly. I do. I want to put it on my resume. Like, I feel very excited about it. And so, I think they're pearl clutching over the fact that we are giving because we know teens are going to have sex. Like,
Absolutely.
It doesn't, like, you can say whatever you want. That's one thing we know has always been true. Like, teens are going to try to have sex. Like, yes. Maybe they may not even be successful. Like, let's be real. It's not a sexy time, but they're going to want to try.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's our job to give them all the tools they need to make the best decisions for themselves. And that ranges from anywhere from running essays from young women that chose not to have sex in college to young women that need access to abortion and their story. We don't shy away from those issues. And it's been, and we have the full support here, obviously. Like, it's never been an internal fight, but it is externally. I mean, those are the things we get criticized for the most, because I think there's this idea that teens, we have to protect them, and they're these, like, flowers that we have to protect. And we're saying, hey, this is not how these teens are navigating their bodies or sexuality or any of these questions.
Of course
they
not.
have questions and they need answers.
Well, you're very qualified to write about this, because you wrote a book called Outdated: Why Dating is Ruining Your Love Life, which I think is an absolutely wonderful title. And there was an informal poll taken of Barnard women, and Barnard is avant-garde, it's progressive, my God, and pretty much every these are fresh women. Every woman had sex, and every woman had at some point, quote, hooked up, quote unquote, but almost no women had an orgasm. Now, what does that tell us? Isn't it interesting? So the pressure to have sex, the peer pressure was enormous, but they didn't know what an orgasm was. So this is very serious to educate young women about what they deserve for their bodies and how to get it. And
absolutely.
And if it upsets Fox, all the better.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know what their relationships look like, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of their wives are reading, our content around pleasure.
If not, we recommend it. Thank you, and thank you for being with us today on the program.
And likewise, Robin, thank you. You are a legend yourself. It is an honor to be honored by the Women's Media Center and to talk to you.
And now for our final break before we return with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Yes, it's time for some fighting words. Just for the relief of it, I want to repeat what I said earlier, a sentence so many Americans have been waiting for. The majority of registered voters, not just registered Democratic voters, but all registered voters, now believe Trump should be impeached. That majority doesn't yet say he should be removed from office, but that number itself is approaching 47%. And it's heartening, too, that Americans now grasp what schools no longer teach, which is the difference between impeachment and removal, that the former is basically the indictment, the accusation only, and to smother it is to shatter First Amendment free speech rights. And then, in the Senate, comes the trial and the judgment, and, I would hope, personally, removal. Safety in numbers, the saying goes. Well, that's certainly demonstrable throughout history, at least by humans, and by some other animals. Lemmings, for instance, are notorious for quickly huddling together when frightened and running as a mass in one direction, even if it leads them off the edge of a cliff, and even if they can see in advance that it will lead them off the edge of a cliff. That's what happens if you have an automaton sense of community and just a smidgen of agency. On the other hand, the Me Too movement took almost 30 years to gather a following, from Anita Hill, 1991, and then Tarana Burke, 2006, and later Ashley Judd and the Hollywood Glitterati in 2017. That's what happens when you've been robbed of any sense of community and kept powerless without agency. But in either type situation, and however long it takes, safety in numbers comes only after one person has decided that the situation, no matter how dangerous, is just too intolerable to remain silent. Which brings us, as you may have intuited, to the whistleblower, and then a few other whistleblowers in other government departments, now coming forward with still other damning information, more and more demonstrating Trump's long-term obsession to engender a Ukrainian investigation of the Bidens in order to smear his chief political rival. Correction, it wasn't just Ukraine that Trump put pressure on. He also tried to shake down China to investigate his political adversary, and God knows who else, because the texts now just keep on coming, and these aren't even the documents that are buried in that sacred secret server. Trump, as usual, denies, deflects, reverses the accusations, and then finally, as he feels himself cornered, admits, yeah, he did it, and he was right to do it because he has, his quote, his words, absolute power, close quote, to have done what he did. Well, take that, Adams and Jefferson. See, what my brain keeps circling, though, is why, at this late stage, outside of the Trump fanatic loyalists, of course, there are still any holdouts defending him. I can understand those who actually believe him and believe in him. That is, I can understand them the way I comprehend squid, which is vague respect for another life form, but no real understanding whatsoever. But all those Republican senators who privately roll their eyes and express disgust with Trump, yet publicly go mute, they mystify me. I'm not naive, but really, do a few more months in power make that much difference to them? Do they think that they can squeeze through, enough gerrymandering and bank forgiveness and Torquemada judicial appointments to make it worthwhile? Surely they know they're going down next year, which is why so many in both houses are quietly resigning or announcing they've just decided not to run again. They're all home in their districts at present, getting an earful from constituents, and that might stiffen a few spines, though I doubt it. They remain trammeled to Trump and the NRA. To me, though, the mystery is that all that temptation is on the other side. So it seems to me. Surely each of them must know that the first one to step forward and break silence earns not only the respect of his or her children, but a place in history as a profile in courage. That's not tempting? Surely each of these men and women must know that then a second will follow, a shade less timid, but just as is happening with the whistleblowers there, nonetheless. Then the trickle strengthens, and suddenly it's a flood, and by that time the flood gets renamed as rats deserting the sinking ship. Wouldn't you rather be a profile in courage than a rat swimming for its life? These aren't men and women in need of their jobs, after all. Most of the Republicans in the Senate were millionaires before they even ran for office. If it's infatuation with power that keeps them there, their power is illusory, and they must know that. First, it's fading fast, and second, it's in service to Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump, both of whom are demonstrably also on a downward trajectory. You could put it another way. Donald and Mitch are the two leader lemmings heading for the cliff. The whistleblower, however, like Anita Hill and all who followed her, embody a different sentiment entirely. The Inuit peoples of northwest Canada and Alaska have their own proverb. It is the first swimmer on the ice who gets the most cut. The second finds the ice broken, and the third finds it gone. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now on Instagram at The Robin Morgan. And you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net, find my latest book, Dark Matter, wherever books are sold, and you can pre-order my forthcoming brand new novel in a few weeks. It'll be out, Parallax. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Who knows what will have happened by the next time we meet? So be sure to join us then on Women's Media Center Live.